When the first light of morning reached the open sea, the ocean awoke in a slow shimmer of gold. The waves rolled softly over the sleeping reefs, and the light of the sun touched the sand like a whisper. The little mermaid rose from her coral bed, her eyes bright with curiosity. She stretched her arms, let her tail catch the sunlight, and watched how the scales glowed in pale blue and green. Each new day in the sea carried a mystery, and she always followed where her heart led. That morning, she noticed the water felt heavier than usual, as though something quiet and sad drifted through it. The songs of the dolphins were distant, and the colorful fish that usually filled her coral garden moved slower than before. She swam through her home, past the coral towers she loved most, and her heart sank when she saw them. Many of the corals that once glowed with rich pink and orange light now lay dull and gray. Their tips were brittle, their branches pale. The reef looked tired, as though the color had drained from its heart. The little mermaid brushed her hand over one of the faded corals. It felt cold, rough where it used to be smooth, lifeless where it used to hum softly with the pulse of the sea. She knew that corals were living things, fragile but strong when cared for, and that the reef depended on them. Without color, without light, it would soon fall silent. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. She had cleaned coral before and sung to the fish to keep them calm, but this seemed different. The color was not only gone from the coral, it was gone from the water itself. It was as if something deep beneath the surface had dimmed. So she decided to follow the current. Perhaps it would lead her to the reason the reef had lost its glow. The water grew cooler as she swam, and the sunlight above began to fade into blue shadow. The current guided her past forests of seagrass and through canyons of stone, until she saw something shimmer faintly in the distance. The shimmer was strange, like tiny sparks drifting in the dark. They floated slowly, glowing in every color of the rainbow. She followed them deeper and saw that they led to a small clearing surrounded by rock. In the center stood a single coral tower, bright, whole and alive, its surface painted with colors so vivid they seemed to move. And beside that coral sat a small crab with a shell that glittered like polished glass. His claws moved delicately, and between them he held something she had never seen before, a small brush made from seaweed fibers tied to a spine of shell. Around him lay small piles of glowing sand and crushed shells, arranged in perfect circles of color. The little mermaid hovered silently, watching as he dipped his brush into the sand and drew slow strokes across the coral. Wherever he touched, color bloomed instantly. A gray branch turned bright crimson, a pale spot deepened to gold. The shades blended as though the water itself had become his canvas. The crab worked with steady rhythm, each movement calm, deliberate, precise. The mermaid felt as though she were watching a painter who spoke not with sound but with care. She drifted closer and saw that his shell shimmered with every color he had ever used, deep blues, pinks, emeralds and soft white. The patterns on his shell were not random, but looked like tiny reefs themselves, glowing with life. She realized that he had been doing this for a very long time. The crab paused and set his brush on a flat rock, as if feeling her presence. For a moment neither moved. The water between them glowed with faint color from the coral he had painted. The mermaid smiled softly, and though no words passed between them, she understood his purpose. He was the coral painter, the one who restored what the sea had faded. She wanted to help. She gathered small handfuls of glowing sand from the seabed and brought them to him. The crab tapped one claw gently, dipping his brush into the fresh colors. When he touched the coral again, the shades grew deeper, warmer, more alive. She began to clear away bits of dead coral and loosened stones, making space for him to work. Together, they moved in perfect rhythm, the crab painting, the mermaid tending, both part of the same quiet music. As hours passed, the reef began to awaken. The coral spread its arms wider, fish swam closer, and tiny star-shaped plankton settled like dusting light over the new colors. The dull gray turned to rose and sapphire, gold and violet. The mermaid's heart lifted as she saw life return. It was as though the sea had taken a deep breath after being still for too long. When she grew tired, she rested beside the coral tower, watching the crab work. His patience fascinated her. He never hurried, never wasted a stroke. Every movement was full of care, and each tiny detail mattered. She realized his work was not only to paint but to listen to the rhythm of the sea, to the coral's silent needs, to the balance of color and life. The mermaid thought of her own world, the bright reefs, the playful fish, the songs of dolphins, and understood that all of it depended on quiet hands like his. Those who repaired what others overlooked kept the sea alive. As the day faded, a soft light spread through the clearing. The freshly painted coral reflected the last rays of the sun, glowing like flame beneath the water. The fish darted through the color as though weaving patterns of joy. The mermaid watched in silence, her heart full. But then she noticed something beyond the beauty, a patch of coral far away that remained gray, untouched by the color. She pointed toward it, and the crab followed her gaze. He hesitated, then began the long walk toward it, dragging his brush gently across the sand. The mermaid helped by clearing the path and brushing away the loose stones. When he reached the patch, he touched his brush to the coral's dull surface. At first, nothing happened. Then a faint shimmer appeared, spreading slowly outward. The crab paused, then dipped his brush again. The second stroke brought light. The third brought color. And then the coral bloomed. It burst into radiant orange and deep violet, brighter than any she had seen that day. The mermaid laughed softly in her heart, though no sound escaped her lips. The reef, once pale and forgotten, had come back to life. Together they worked until twilight settled in the water. The crab rested at last, placing his brush beside his shell. The mermaid looked around. The entire valley glowed with color-soft gold, rose, turquoise, and green. The reef hummed gently, as if singing its thanks. Tiny fish darted in playful circles, their scales catching the new light. Even the current seemed to slow, carrying the calm through the sea. The mermaid looked down at the crab, who was still and peaceful, his shell glowing faintly. She understood that his gift was not only in his art, but in his patience. Every stroke had been made with love, not haste. He reminded her that the sea did not rush to bloom. It grew slowly, and beauty always returned when cared for. She returned home late that night, the colors of the reef still dancing in her thoughts. When she closed her eyes, she dreamed of painting the sea herself, of brushing her hands through the water, and leaving trails of light. She dreamed of every coral shining again, of every dull place glowing back to life. The next morning, when she swam through her reef, she saw something new. The corals she had touched the day before glowed softly, as if they remembered the painter's song. The water felt lighter, filled with quiet joy. And in the distance, she thought she saw a trail of faint shimmer leading away, a sign that the coral painter had moved on, bringing color to another forgotten place. She smiled and whispered a promise in her heart, that she too would carry his lesson wherever she swam, to be gentle, to be patient, and to bring light where it had faded.